All right, everybody, welcome back to the series. Today I'm going to do a video about warm-up sets and working sets and the differences between them. So to kick it off, I wanted to go through a few definitions just to make sure that there's no confusion on what I mean when I go through this terminology. This is just stuff that's generally applicable to weightlifting, but also to exercise. So a big one is repetition or a rep, and that's just a single execution of an exercise. You pick the bar up once, you put it down, that's one rep. A set is a group of repetitions. And so a set of 7 means that you pick up the bar and put it down 7 times before you rest. So it's continuous reps until resting. And those two things are very, very key. And understand that you could have a set of 15 reps and you could have a set of 1 rep. Maximally heavy lifts are 1 rep. Then there's the concept of load. So load is the amount of weight that you move, or basically how much weight is on the bar for weightlifting. It can be measured at the rep level, the set level, or the workout level, even the program level. So you could calculate how much weight you moved per rep for your whole day, and then at the end you could see a really big number that would look more impressive and actually wouldn't mean as much as you think it does. But it is helpful to compare one session to another to see how much total weight that you moved as one indicator of differences or volume or intensity. And then we want to talk about stress and stimulus. So in order to get your body to adapt and change based on the exercise that you're doing, you have to produce or go through stress adequate enough to make a stimulus. And so the stress comes from the load that you lift, and load only causes stress on an individual level, right? It's not about the absolute amount of weight that you lift, it's about your specific ability to lift it. And so, for example, my little daughter, who is 4, if she lifts 10 pounds, that's much more taxing on her body than if I do. And so she might actually have an adequate stimulus by lifting 10 pounds where I would not, depending on the exercise. And so that's super important because it is only through adequately stressful stimulus that your body actually changes. And anything less than that is actually wasting a good portion of your time and will give you minimal results. When we say a working set, this is when the set that you're doing has sufficient stress to create a stimulus for improvement. So only those things that you do, again, that produce that necessary amount of stress will actually force your body to go through the processes necessary to build more muscle and to get stronger. A warm-up set in that context then is any set that you do that's not stressful enough to do that. Warm-up sets are very important. They prime your body for performance and they help you to get ready to do your working sets. But if all you ever did was a warm-up set, your body would not grow much at all. And then finally, I wanted to touch on the fact that there's this general concept of just warming up. This just means the activity that you would do to get your whole body ready to move and ready to lift. And so that might be some light cardio work just to get your blood pumping, to make your body feel good. It could be some light stretching or dynamic movement or something like that. And it's very important as well. But there is a big difference between a general warm-up, which is just that general activity, and then a warm-up set, which is actually in the pattern of the working set that you're going to do. All right. So as I just mentioned, a general warm-up includes things like walking or dynamic movement, and it's not specific to the exercise that you're going to do. Generally, when I work up or warm up at the gym, I like to walk for 5 or 10 minutes just to sort of get my blood pumping and feel good, especially if I've spent the last 6 or 7 hours working at a desk or in my office environment. I also go through a bunch of dynamic movements, so just making my body move through every plane of motion, every range of motion, not with any heavy weight or anything, but just to move it around and get it feeling sort of loose and good. And this is super important, because it primes your body and it helps protect against injury. Now, warm-up sets specifically are in the pattern of the working set that you're going to do. So if you're going to do a working set of bench press, then the warm-up sets that you're going to do are just lighter versions of that same lift. So say I'm in a bench press 225 pounds for my working set. I might start with just the bar and go through the same amount of reps I'm going to do. And then I might add like 135 pounds, then 185 pounds, and then eventually I'll hit my 225 pounds. So again, they are in the same pattern of a working set, but with less intensity. Now, a really important question is, how do I know I'm doing a working set? Because you can't just measure it off of arbitrary load that you're putting on the bar. You have to measure it in terms of the response and the stress that it's putting on your body. And so here's a couple of ways that you can start to see if you're really working. And again, working is hard. It is like your heaviest warm-up set, you might say, is pretty difficult work. And so a working set is even harder than that. The ultimate way to see if you're doing a working set is if you were to get to complete muscular failure, which means that you literally can't move the bar or move the weight anymore at all. And going to failure is a really important concept, especially in the gospel, actually, when you talk about giving all your heart, might, mind, and strength for something. And I do think I want to talk about that later. But in terms of what we're talking about here, there's a concept called the rate of perceived exertion, or RPE, which is a way of estimating just how hard you are working. So it's on a scale of 1 to 10. Anything 6 or lower would be considered a warm-up set, and 7 or above would be considered a working set. And how does that translate into what you're doing? Well, if you rated yourself an RPE of 8, that means that whatever workout or whatever exercise that you just did, you might have 2, maybe 1 reps left in the tank when you're done. So you could maybe conceivably do 2 more before you'd be at absolute failure. And when you first start guessing your own perceived exertion, you are horrible at it. And this is a big barrier for people in the gym, is they think that they are doing more work than they are doing. Most people have much, much more to give and are much stronger or have much more endurance physically than they do mentally. And so one of the benefits of learning to do this is that you start to more accurately perceive what you could do, and therefore work harder. A couple of other kind of less obvious indicators that you're doing a working set would be your heart rate or your breathing rate. Like if you just did an exercise and you're breathing so hard that you can't catch your breath, that's probably an indication that you worked hard enough to create a stimulus. Also, bar speed, which is an interesting thing. So if you think about picking up a bar off the ground, and however fast that you would do that normally, if you're picking up something heavy enough that on the 3rd or 4th rep or something, all of a sudden that bar comes up a lot more slowly than it did before, that's a great indicator that you're working harder and actually creating a stimulus, because your body is barely able to move that bar. Let's see. So again, I wanted to mention big mistakes when it comes to warming up. So failing to warm up at all, that's a horrible idea. If you sat at a desk and then you just went right from a desk to doing a RPE 10, which would be the hardest you could possibly move, 1 rep to full failure without any warm up, not only would you put yourself at a fairly high risk of injuring something, but you also would not be able to lift as much as you would if you had not warmed up. So warm-ups actually lead to higher loads being able to be borne. And that's also really important to think about. And the second big mistake that people make all the time, which I just mentioned with RPE, is that a lot of people mistake a warm-up set for a working set. They go to the gym, they do something that seems sort of decently difficult, or maybe they have a program that tells them that do, three sets of 12 reps, and they do their 12 reps, and the 12th one might be a little bit hard, but it wasn't that bad, and they put it down and they say, well, good, I did something. And again, if you are not moving hard enough to create that stimulus, then you're not going to get where you want to go. So that's a huge watch out. Now let's broaden this out to the general principle. And that principle is that anything in your life, and especially spiritually, you can follow a pattern of a warm-up set and a working set. So I wanted to look at this in specifics with regards to prayer, but understand that you could do the same process and think about it in terms of not just prayer, but you could do it for your Sabbath observance, you could do it for your scripture study, you could do it with anything like that. So maybe we'll touch on a few of those principles, but first let's look at prayer. So ask yourself this question: are your prayers a general warm-up, or are they a warm-up set, or are they a working set? When would your prayers be a general warm-up, right? And remember, a general warm-up is when you're just doing unrelated preparatory work before doing something specific that sort of primes the pump, so to speak. Anytime that you're praying before doing a task, or before a meeting, or before an event, or before you do something else, you could think of prayer in that case as a warm-up set, or a general warm-up. And it's appropriate. However, can you ask yourself, have I ever prayed as a working set? Meaning, have I ever prayed so hard or so long or some combination of intensity and volume that I created a sufficient stimulus and enough stress that I had to grow as a result? And what does that even look like? Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that sounds kind of ridiculous to spend that much time or that much effort praying, then I would invite you to consider that you are leaving much on the table that could be yours if you had put in sufficient effort. Because from personal experience, having prayed for either a very long time or with much intensity of emotion or both, like, you can reach spiritual failure in a prayer where you literally pour your whole soul out to God. If you want a good example of this in the scriptures, go read in Mosiah 26 when Alma has to figure out what to do with unrepentant sinners in the church. And it says that he pours his whole soul out to God to figure out that question. When was the last time you poured your whole soul out? What does that even mean? I assure you, it is not a 5-minute prayer where you sort of mumble through the framework that you were taught when you were a kid. So prayer is a working set. It gets something done. It creates a stimulus. That stimulus that you're looking for changes you, and it changes your relationship with God. And you can do it often. But it's not just related to individual prayers. Now, applying the warm-up set principle, sometimes you have to pray about something quite a bit and pray harder and harder over a period of time. It could be several days, it could be several weeks, it could be several years. And finally, you've put yourself in a position, you've changed your own mind and you've changed your own self enough that you are ready for that working set. So evaluate your prayers, not just on an individual basis, but over the course of a week, for example, or even over the course of a day. You know, you should pray at least morning and night, but probably more. And you should always be praying, technically. If you read the Doctrine and Covenants, pray always, right? So how can you prime your prayers, for example, in the evening by warming up for them throughout your day? That's something important to think about. How might you warm up or put yourself in a position to have the best prayer? That's another thing to think about. Are you able to put yourself in a position where you have the privacy that you need? Do you have the uninterrupted time that you need. If you need to pray for an hour, are you able to do that? And as a parent with younger kids, the best time for me to do that is super early in the morning, way before everyone else gets up. And that's a sacrifice, but it is more than worth it to be able to have uninterrupted time to really pour your soul out to God. What other things could you do to generally prepare? Is prayer only what happens when you're talking in the moment? What about writing questions? What about pondering and thinking and searching the scriptures for things that you should pray for, or finding ways to say what you should pray for? What if the only reason that you're not getting an answer to your question is because your question is bad or you're asking it wrong? If you only think of God as who asks yes or no questions, you're limiting him in terms of what he could and would say to you. If you were to ask him something more broad and then had the faith requisite to receive the answer. Let's go to this concept again of are you confusing your warm-ups and your working sets? Remember that it's a very common mistake to think that you've given everything that you have when you absolutely have not. I can't tell you how many times in the gym I've been with somebody who is relatively new and they do like 3 reps of something, and that 3rd rep is just as fast and easy as the first one, and they quit and they say they're tired, and we say you can do like 6 more, and then they do. You should approach spiritual things in this way. Literally pray until you can't pray anymore, however long that takes. And that will give you a better way to estimate how hard you're working. Now, I won't go through all of these things. It is interesting and kind of funny to think about what is the bar speed equivalent of praying in a working set. But I'll leave that up to your imagination and to the Spirit to teach you that. And again, one other thing that you could ask yourself is to really view if you're working instead of warming up, is there perceivable growth over time? If you prayed for a whole year the way that you're praying right now, and at the end of the year your prayers are the same and you feel the same and you make the same mistakes and you have the same problems, there hasn't been any perceivable growth in you over that time period, which just means that you need to try harder. And maybe that's the last nugget that I'll throw in here at the end of this idea. And I don't mean this to be in any way derogatory, and I've definitely seen it in my own life. But when it comes to load and to really getting into a working set, the answer to almost every problem I've ever had in my life has been to do more, not less. To lift heavier, not lighter. Like even in cardio, I like to walk because it's relatively nice on my joints, but it's not very stimulating. And it wasn't very engaging until I bought a weighted vest and started walking with 45 pounds on a vest, doing the same speed I was doing before. And all of a sudden, that walk was a lot more challenging, but guess what? It was a lot more rewarding, and I looked forward to it a lot more. Plus, it was benefiting my body a lot more. And if you are struggling to get through something in your life, I guarantee you that the answer is taking more responsibility and lifting more load, not less. You cannot run away from a problem. You cannot ignore it. You don't need more comfort. You need more pain. You don't need more safety. You need more danger and more bravery. Being willing to go to failure is what will actually cause that growth. And you will get stronger and you'll be doing the same work, but then all of a sudden it won't be so bad because you've changed. And so I hope you think about these principles. I invite you to go think about through your life what you do spiritually, what you do temporally. Ask yourself, am I warming up or am I working out? Is this a general warm-up? Is it a warm-up set, or is it a working set? And really, I promise you that if you do that, you'll see a big difference in your mental preparation and motivation for taking on strong challenges. So hope that was helpful. Take care till the next one.